Okay, Year 12 Global Politics, welcome back. And today we're going to be looking at the responses taken by global actors and in relation to people movement. And when we're looking at these responses, we need to be looking at, how effective they've been and how these responses reflect the obligations that or the obligations of the international laws. So obviously, the key knowledge just says responses by global actors, including cosmopolitan and realist perspectives. So this is where our understanding of realism and cosmopolitanism are important, because you need to be able to link those two key terms to responses. And we also need to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the responses. So talk about, when they've been effective and when they have been ineffective. I've also above have also included parts of the study design. So what's in the blurb, because remember that is accessible and that does give us some hints about what we need to be saying and what we need to know. So it says that students examine and analyze the effectiveness of responses. So we're not always just going to be evaluating, we may need to analyze the effectiveness of the response. So, in a way, I guess analyze will probably be quite similar. We're breaking down what is effective, what is ineffective. We'll be linking cosmopolitanism and realism into our response. So we need to be able to analyze it, and also the extent to which these responses reflect the obligations outlined in the relevant international law. So we need to be able to link our responses back to, what article in the international law they are upholding and which article are they not upholding. It says also students will develop an understanding that responses may be guided by ethical perspectives. And when we're talking about ethical perspectives, we're talking about cosmopolitanism and realism. Those are our two key perspectives. It says also, similarly, a global actor's perspective may determine its view of how justice can be achieved in relation to these ethical issues. So justice varies, it is based on, moral righteousness, ethics, could be also punishment. So it will vary depending on the global actor. And it importantly says, cosmopolitanism is not universally accepted. And a lot of the responses we're about to look at show that really it isn't always accepted. So I hope you've got your popcorn, because we're going to be here for a little while. There's quite a few responses to look at, because we do have responses for both international laws. Okay, so our first global actor is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So what I've got here are a few of the different responses that they have taken. I haven't linked the High Commissioner for Refugees to the articles, because they are, I guess, the guardian of the Refugee Convention. So, there isn't really, they aren't really linking back to articles. I would say that they're probably going to be upholding all of them. The first response was recently. They created a hashtag called Everyone Counts. And it was just to create awareness and fundraise. The core message was really that everyone has a role to play in helping refugees, that we all need to work together to raise refugee voices, and everyone plays a role in combating xenophobia, intolerance, and fear. It was, the celebrities involved, it was quite a big deal. The next response, which is a bit more relevant because other global actors can contribute to this, such as Australia, is the resettlement program. So the UNHCR runs a resettlement program, which is when refugees are transferred from a state where they sought asylum to another state that agrees to take them, and then they will be permanently settled. So, people that are refugees in Somalia could be then resettled as part of the resettlement program to Australia. So that's really how it works. This is their ideal program. They want more people to be resettled, because it does mean that, that they're not living in camps. They are in the community. They are living now among us. However, there's only 1% or fewer than 1% of refugees are resettled every year. In 2020, the UNHCR submitted files for over 39,500 refugees for consideration to be resettled, and only 22,800 of them were resettled, which was lower than usual. So, there's not a lot of people being resettled in it. It's a nice idea, but it just hasn't really, they haven't got a huge amount of people that are becoming refugees under this program. We also have the refugee camp in Jordan. This has been running since 2012, which houses Syrian refugees. It's home to nearly 80,000 people, nearly 20% under the age of 5. In this camp, it's like a city. There's schools, there's food, water, sanitation, shelter, but the UNHCR, they don't really want to be making camps. They want life to be normal for these people. So it's their hope that more people will be resettled. That's what they aim to do. They also have the Global Compact on Refugees. Now, this was basically started in the United Nations General Assembly, which affirmed the Global Compact on Refugees. And they had consultations with the UNHCR, with member states, international organizations, refugees, civil society, private sector, and experts. So this is something that they are continuing to work towards, and it's another response that they have taken. Now, mostly their response has been, pretty much, they're just a cosmopolitan approach because they encourage all states to uphold human rights that belong to asylum seekers. They do acknowledge that, asylum seekers don't have the same rights as refugees. Refugees obviously in the Refugee Convention are given more rights, but they do believe that they should have some rights. And due to their cosmopolitan perspective, they believe all asylum seekers are owed human dignity, and the highest quality assessment should be made in determining whether an asylum seeker is a legitimate refugee. So that's the UNHCR. In terms of how they've been effective, we can say that there has been some success. In 2019, in their resettlement program, 81,000 submissions were made to be resettled, and 63,000 were successfully resettled. In terms of educating and trying to provide a life for these people, there's 63% of children in refugee camps were attending primary school, which is good. They are, getting an education. 149 states are party to the Refugee Convention. So that means that, the UNHCR is helping these states try to comply with the Refugee Convention. As part of their role to guard and protect this convention, they give comments and policy proposals. So they can actually try to help countries comply more with the international law. And, in 2019, they proposed ideas to 24 countries. So they did try to help them actually, improve their protection of refugees. And we saw that 16 states actually adopted laws and changed their laws to improve the rights of refugees, which is good. Also, the UNHCR distributed $650 million in cash assistance and provided, so that was more money than in what was in 2019. And they also provided shelter to over 116,000 people. However, the issue for the UNHCR is that people who have been displaced because of war or conflict can't return to their country of origin. And when we start to look at, refugee resettlement and countries that take in refugees, they're not taking a huge amount. There's only a limited number that are being taken. So that's a problem because we aren't then seeing, these people being accepted and then, having their rights upheld. So it does make it difficult for the UNHCR to actually help these people in need. For example, in 2019, the US received over 300,000 applications for people seeking asylum, and only 30,000 were resettled. So, we have a huge demand for people to go to other countries and not enough. The definition of the refugee has not been expanded. So that's difficult for the UNHCR because, there are now people being displaced because of climate, because they're climate. However, they can't really do very much about it because they aren't classified as a refugee. Also, the UNHCR has no ability to prosecute states who aren't complying with the Refugee Convention. So they don't have as much power to ensure compliance here. Okay. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Australia. Australia's been mostly a realist when it comes to refugees. And we're talking here about Australia's response to the Refugee Convention. So we have detention centres, which have been operating since August 2012. So any person in Australia who comes by sea without a valid visa can be removed and placed into Manus Island or Nauru for processing, even if they have applied for asylum. So yeah, we have got these detention centres. As of 2020, there are 230 refugees and asylum seekers in Nauru and 180 in Papua New Guinea. So I'll write that there. 180 to 30. In this policy, anyone who is attempting to reach Australia by boat is turned back to their country of departure. So that's not detention centres. That's Operation Sovereign Borders. But in detention centres, we hold people in detention if they come to Australia via, without a valid visa, and when they come by boat. Then we have Operation Sovereign Borders in September 2013. It's a military-led operation. It's mainly about combating people smuggling and protecting Australia's borders. So border security really is at the heart of this, which makes us a realist because it is just focusing on our self-interests rather than the interests of the international community. So yeah, if you come, we will send you away. It's a military operation. It's quite intense. In terms of its success at doing what they've aimed to do, in 2018, Peter Dutton said that 33 boats were blocked by Operation Sovereign Borders, and that, during this time that, over 800 people have been sent away. There's two parts really to this, well, nearly three parts. There's the detention centres, so people may be held in detention centres, or there's turnbacks and takebacks. Turnbacks is when the vessel is removed and then returned to international waters, which could potentially be breaching the Refugee Convention if there are legitimate refugees on board. This would be in violation of Article 33, non-refoulement, if there are genuine refugees on board. Whereas takebacks is that Australia will work with where they have come from and will try to return them back to where they came from. So those are our two parts of Operation Sovereign Borders. There has been claims that then we have violated the Refugee Convention because of non-refoulement, and because we haven't effectively evaluated whether these people are actually legitimate refugees. So those are two harsh responses by Australia, two realist responses. Then we have response 3, which is that we have actually signed and ratified the Refugee Convention. And this has been incorporated in the Refugee Convention. It's been incorporated into the Refugee Convention, and then we have the Migration Act. Then we also have, as part of the resettlement, Australia has implemented a refugee humanitarian program, and we have accepted, a couple of thousand refugees. So that's something that Australia has done better. However, these two things are realist responses, and they have been ineffective. Not that that means really that realism means that you are not being an effective global actor, but we're talking about upholding the international law. And, here we aren't really upholding international law with these responses. So Australia is being a realist because it's in the interests of the government. We are focusing on border security. We aren't focusing on humanity and helping the global community. We're people that are being classified as, illegal refugees, are being sent away. So, it is in our interest, not in the interest of the humans and the people involved in it. A report by The Guardian in 2020 shows that Australia has spent more than $1.2 billion in offshore processing in one calendar year, which shows that really this is an important part of our border security. So we are willing to spend, $1.2 billion on this strategy. So really, it is important to us. It is in our national interests that border security exists. So, it is an important part of our policy. And we are also then not accepting refugees. So therefore it's, we're being a realist. However, on the other side, Australia's resettlement program can be classified as cosmopolitan because we are providing assistance to refugees and are resettling them. So, even though, 18,000 have been resettled, it's not a huge number, we are still allowing people to be resettled, which is good. So the evaluation, has Australia been effective in upholding the obligations to the Refugee Convention? So remember, we do need to be linking back to the international law. So to start off with, Australia is a signatory to the Refugee Convention and is bound by the standards. We have incorporated the obligations to protect refugees under the Migration Act. Also, we are part of the UNHCR's resettlement program, and we have allocated over 18,000 places to refugees between 2018 and 2019. So those are the good things that Australia has done in upholding the obligations to the Refugee Convention. Because here, protecting refugees, well, that's upholding Article 1, which defines what a refugee is, and resettling refugees is adhering to a lot of the obligations that are included in the Refugee Convention. If you are classified as a refugee, you have the right to shelter, the right to work, the right to education. By resettling these people, we are allowing these things to occur. However, there has been some issues with our, how we have tried to uphold the Refugee Convention, or maybe our, how effective we've been here. So there's ambiguity around Article 31. So Article 31 only applies to refugees, not asylum seekers. So people that are being sent away may not be classed as refugees yet. However, when we may be, we call them enhanced screenings, which makes it sound like we're really thoroughly investigating, and there's been allegations that they haven't been very effective. But, you know, we may not have actually properly assessed whether these people are classified as refugees. So, you know, there has been some issue and there has been some discussion as to whether or not that's actually been very effective. But either way, Article 31, you know, shows that, you know, we may not have actually upheld this obligation because, you know, we have sent people away, and, you know, this could be punishing them. Also, what we have said is that, you know, people that we are sending away have, you know, come from Indonesia, but the people themselves aren't Indonesian. So, you know, there's been discussion as to whether or not when we send these people back, whether or not they're actually going to be threatened, or, you know, they're not coming from a country where their life or freedom was threatened. So there's some dispute as to whether or not that has actually been upheld. So this is all just really from Australia's perspective. You know, they say that we haven't actually violated Article 31 because, you know, these people aren't classified as refugees and they've come from Indonesia, even though they're not Indonesian. So they're not going to be at risk by returning. And then that also means that Australia may not be in breach of Article 33 and non-refoulement. However, there has been, you know, a lot of discussion around this, and, you know, many people in the international community do criticise this by Australia. Then, another global actor to look at is Italy. So Italy has a policy, or had a policy in 2004 called Mare Nostrum. 2014. This policy cost the Italian government $12 million a month. It depended on 32 Navy ships, helicopters, and a submarine, but it saved 140,000 lives, and 3,000 people died, but that's because they weren't reached in time. So, and then when they arrived in Italy, they were provided with medical treatment, food, and legal aid if they wanted to claim asylum. Then they were let out into the community. However, migrants then travelled across Europe and then would find where they actually wanted to go. So this policy in 2014 did save lives. You know, 140,000 lives were saved at sea. And this makes the response a cosmopolitan one because it is concentrating on saving people's lives, and also by helping these people, providing them with medical treatment and food and legal aid. It is, you know, that they have actually done good here. However, in 2019, Italy had a different policy. There was an election in 2018 and a far right-wing coalition won with an anti-migrant sentiment. So he made it that there was going to be a policy where they wouldn't allow private ships to dock at Italian ports, meaning that, you know, non-governmental organizations who were, you know, using ships to then save asylum seekers at sea weren't able to do that. And if they did that, they would be punished. And one of the quotes that the minister made was that Italy won't be Europe's refugee camp because, you know, a lot of people were arriving in Italy and then leaving and going off to other places. This became, you know, into the attention of the international community when a ship called the Ocean Viking was trying to dock in Italy, and it had 356 asylum seekers on board and they weren't allowed to. So after 11 days at sea, 6 EU states such as Germany, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Portugal, and Romania all agreed to take the asylum seekers, but not Italy. So this is a complete opposite. They went from protecting the lives at sea, whereas now they are refusing to take these people. They're kind of going on a more realist side. So in 2019, only 11,000 migrants arrived in Italy by boat, compared to 2013 to 2017, when it was over 100,000 people per year. And this policy continued in 2020. So there's two different sides here with Italy. We see Mare Nostrum, where they're taking all these people on board and letting them come live in Italy. And then we have a complete opposite, where they're not allowing people to, this complete opposite. You're not allowed to come to, you're not allowed to have your boat dock. So basically, if you have arrived by sea, you can't dock your ship, can't dock your boat here. Okay. The next few responses that we're looking at are in response to the Smuggling Migrants Protocol. So there's a few different responses here, and the first one we're going to be looking at is the EU. So to give you some context, in Europe, there was a refugee crisis when there was a number of asylum seekers trying to get into Europe, and they were trying to get to Europe from basically Syria. And during this time, to kind of combat that, the EU developed this facilitator package, which makes it a crime to help facilitate illegal entry. And they took a very narrow interpretation of this law and said that facilitation means you were helping migrants with food or shelter. So they are ignoring the Smuggling Migrants Protocol, because under the Smuggling Migrants Protocol, it was that if you receive some sort of financial benefit, you're a smuggler and you shouldn't be punished. And that you should be punished. However, here, there's no financial benefit from helping someone with food and shelter, and yet you are being punished here. So that was the response taken by the EU here, the facilitators package, which was very controversial. Another response was that they invested 15 million euros into dismantling smuggling and trafficking in North Africa. So that's also another response they've taken. They have ratified the protocol against smuggling. And this one's interesting. The European Border and Coastal Guard Agency had 3 different operations going in the Mediterranean to rescue migrants at risk and fight migrant smuggling. So during that time, they saved over 500,000 lives. The main purpose of this was really to secure their borders, target migrants, and rescue migrants at sea. So that was one part of the operation. The other part was that they launched a military operation, which was about disrupting the business of human smuggling and trafficking. So they had information gathering and patrolling by planes. So they were in the air trying to suss out where they were. And also during this time, they were relatively successful. They arrested 143 suspected smugglers. They destroyed 545 boats and trained 144 Libyan coast guards. So, they were here actively trying to stop the trade of people smuggling. We've got, here that this is actually like quite a tough approach. And this approach, along with this, can probably be seen as cosmopolitan, because they are actually looking out for the global community and more thinking about the people rather than their national interests. Whereas this one's about, I think this one's a bit more about national interests. Okay, so the EU, a cosmopolitan approach. So we have here that their actions, because they are more focusing on, their $15 million project, was focusing on dismantling migrant smuggling, it's, that's seen as something that's cosmopolitan, because it's not about the state or the regional organization, regional grouping. It's not about their survival. It's not about really border security, but more they are trying to protect these people from being smuggled and are upholding their obligations to these people. So in terms of whether they have been effective, there's a few parts to it. It's been effective with signing and ratifying the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol. Their $15 million project was all about dismantling migrant smuggling. So that's been an effective response, because they are trying to tackle the problem. And, they have actually had some sort of success. They have also criminalized the smugglers. So, which does uphold Article 6, because they are now actually holding their smugglers accountable. So that's what's been done well, that they have actually upheld Article 6 through criminalizing the people smugglers. And, there's a few stats there that you could use. However, they do at the same time actually violate Article 6. And this is because they have taken a different interpretation to the protocol. Like I said before, the protocol is all about upholding the rights of the people being smuggled, and that people smugglers need to be punished. And they actually define what people smugglers are, the people that are financially benefiting. But instead here, this protocol is about punishing those who assist migrants, family members, support groups, NGOs. They could all be held and charged under this. And we do have an example of that. There was the example in France where, a hiker offered these asylum seekers some shelter and water, and he was held accountable and was actually charged under this law, the protocol, under the facilitators protocol. So, it does show them that they are violating Article 6, because, if you were assisting a migrant, they aren't receiving any kind of financial benefit, and yet here they are being held responsible. So it is kind of violating this. Also, the UN Smuggling Protocol expressly prohibits the criminalization of smuggled migrants, and then the facilitator does not. So, that does violate Article 6. Also, the facilitators package is inconsistent with Article 3 of the Smuggling Protocol, as it believes that smuggled migrants involve anyone who helps illegal migrants with food or shelter, whereas the protocol believes that there's a financial benefit for those assisting migrants. So really, I guess the main takeaway here is that this Article 6 is being violated, because the protocol says that you will receive some sort of financial benefit, and yet under the facilitators package, if you are just assisting a migrant, you are in violation of their law. So that is violating Article 6. Okay, I think this is our last response. And this is again another response to the smuggling of migrants. And this is Australia's response. So we will be talking about Operation Sovereign Borders again. And this is because it does link with both people smuggling and then also the Refugee Convention, because in this, it does actually outline, that it's not just about protecting our sovereignty, but is also about protecting us from, trying to end the trade of people smuggling. So, yeah. Now, in terms of how effective it is in upholding this this protocol, Article 6 is about criminalisation, and we have actually done this. You know, in the smuggling protocol, we have got laws in place that do criminalise people smugglers. So in Australia, we have the Anti-People Smuggling and Other Measures Act and the Migration Act, which include offences such as people smuggling, meaning when a person organises or facilitates the bringing or coming to Australia, there is a punishment for this, and it is 20 years. Then we also have that we have actually been successful in maybe achieving justice. 600 people smugglers have been arrested across 6 countries since Australia introduced Operation Sovereign Borders. So we can see here that we have actually punished people smugglers. However, we have also violated parts of the protocol, which isn't very good. In Article 2, it's about protecting the rights of migrants, but we do have offshore detention centres and we have Operation Sovereign Borders, which does punish migrants. You know, we have policies of turn back and take backs, you know, where people could be either punished when they return home. And we have seen this happen. You know, some people have been turned back to their country of origin and have been tortured. There was an example of this in Sri Lanka and also Vietnam, and it was in an Amnesty International report. When these people were returned home, they were tortured. Also, under Article 6, in this Amnesty International report, it does say that Australia has not always punished smugglers. And this was because in 2015, Australian officials were alleged to have paid approximately $40,000 in cash to a crew of an asylum seeker vessel to return to Indonesia. So they basically here are paying the people smugglers, are paying them to return these people back to where they came from, which means that we are participating in the trade of people smuggling. This was addressed in a Senate inquiry, and the government refused to confirm nor deny it. We have also Article 5 that says it's not a crime to be smuggled. However, there's nothing in the Migration Act that actually says this. You know, there's nothing in there that says that, you know, if you are smuggled, it's not a crime. You know, and in fact, we've actually had cases where defendants who have been asylum seekers on board have actually been prosecuted in Australia. So, you know, we do have an issue here that we have not been punishing the smugglers. You know, we've paid them, and we are also helping the people on board. Okay, so that's it for today's video on the responses to the international law. It's really important that we are linking back to the articles, and we are also talking about how they are a realist or cosmopolitan. I know that was a really long video, so thanks for hanging in there. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you guys later.